and a very warm welcome to a brand new edition of Frank Talk with me, Frank Rajan Pereira on Rajya Sabha television. I have a very special guest with me on the program today, someone who needs no introduction at all. He's donned several hats all through his career, but the most important one now is the candidate of the Congress in Trivandrum. He is also the sitting MP from this particular seat. It's a pleasure to welcome on the program Dr. Shashi Tharoor. Welcome.
Thank you, Frank. Namaskaram to you.
And thank you for joining us. Firstly, let's talk about your campaigning in Trivandrum. I got a chance, to witness that for about 15 minutes. High octane, I must say.
Well, it's high octane for almost 18 hours a day. I mean, I'm giving you half an hour at 11 p.m. after having been on the campaign trail since 8 a.m. So I can't say that you're catching me at my freshest or at my best. But having said that, it's necessary. I mean, this is a major election for the country, and it's also a major election for Thiruvananthapuram because we have a three-cornered fight. I had won the seat for the first time in 2009 after two successive victories for the Communist Party. And now there is a very viable BJP contender as well. So with me as the two-term incumbent, a certain risk of the votes going any way when there are three potential choices is what's keeping us on our toes. So there is no rest until the voting.
Who's a bigger threat for you, the LDF or the BJP?
Well, until this election, I would have said the LDF. But the BJP scored a surprise last time by beating the LDF to third place. They came second, and not only did they come second, but they came rather close to me, alarmingly close, 15,700 votes. And though that wasn't the narrowest victory in Kerala by any means, there were several that were even smaller margins. This was the largest the BJP had ever got, and it makes us sit up and take the BJP seriously. Their tactic of communal polarization works because of the demographics of Trivandrum, which is a bit untypical for the rest of Kerala. Kerala is 55% Hindu, Trivandrum is 68% Hindu. The upper caste Nair community is 14% in Kerala as a whole, but it's 28% in Trivandrum. So they've got, as they see it, fertile communal ground. Now, I'm obviously appealing beyond community and caste and creed, and I'm hoping that my appeal will cut across all segments, and including some people from the BJP's target audience. And we'll all have to see how it all goes. At this stage, some of the surveys are showing the BJP doing much better than the LDF. And that suggests that they may well be the principal opponent this time around as well as they were last time.
One particular survey also says that the BJP is ahead of you in Trivandrum.
They do indeed, but when you looked at the sample size of the survey, it's 250 persons per parliamentary constituency, because they did a survey for all of the 20 parliamentary constituencies in Kerala. And 250 people, you divide that into assembly segments, you get about 35, 36 people per assembly segment. That is not a significant sample. I mean, you can't even balance the various kinds of combinations of community, religion, gender, age, economic status in a sample that's small. It just isn't a good sample. And so that immediately, to my mind, discounts the value of their findings. And my own assessment, not only from my campaigning impressions, which is obviously my personal assessment, but the ground reports my staff are collecting from people across the place suggest that we are comfortably ahead so far.
So is the victory margin going to be more than 2014 or just 15,000 votes?
No, I'm certainly hoping it'll be better than 2014, definitely, yeah.
What's the big difference between the 2014 election and the 2019 election, do you think?
Well, I think the main difference is that in 2014 there was a bit of a Modi wave even in Trivandrum, in the sense that Mr. Modi talked a good game, sold a lot of dreams, and many people, particularly young voters, for example, bought into those dreams. Whereas here today, there is a great deal of disillusionment after seeing 5 years of the reality. None of the promises made have been kept. We're looking at a country in which unemployment is at record levels, 45 years worst figures, where farmer suicides at record levels, going up every single year during the BJP's tenure, The rupee is depreciating, exports are down, you're seeing industrial stagnation, the economic growth has slumped, the FDI figures for 2017-18 have been the lowest in 5 years. What is there to, where is the Achhe Din and who got it? Certainly nobody that I've met says that they've enjoyed Achhe Din under the BJP rule. So for these reasons, I think that there is a level of disillusionment with the last 5 years that makes it difficult for the BJP to sell a sort of fantasy about itself. When you have an untested challenger, that person can sell a fantasy, but an incumbent has to defend a reality, their own record. And Mr. Modi, sorry to say, doesn't have a record that inspires the kind of excitement that even in Trivandrum we saw in some circles in 2014. So I'm expecting that in 2019, the voters of Trivandrum and of the rest of the country will be both judging whether they were better off under Mr. Modi than they were 5 years ago, as well as judging who offers them the best solutions for their own issues, both locally in their own constituencies, which is why in my case I'm running on my record. I know I've been an effective constituency MP and I have a lot of achievements to point to, which the people are aware of, so that's what I'm running on.
But the BJP candidate from Trivandrum doesn't seem to think so. He says that, there has been no development really as far as Trivandrum is concerned. If you compare it to what's happening in the rest of the country, Trivandrum is not catching up.
All I can say is that, it's quite amusing. As a member of the BJP, you ought to be slightly embarrassed to say that, because an MP's job is to channel central government development projects to the state. So he's not going to influence what the state government invests in development.
But that has happened, is what he has said over the years. Over the last 5 years, a lot of it has happened. Whereas when the Congress ministers were at the center, several of them were at the center, they didn't do much.
No, on the contrary, during the 6 years that the BJP was in power under Mr. Vajpayee, we actually had a Trivandrumite, Mr. Rajagopal, my rival in 2014, elected to the Rajya Sabha from Madhya Pradesh and serving as a minister in Mr. Vajpayee's government. And it's good to see what the BJP did or didn't do here. Now, my major achievement, for example, amongst my major achievements, one was the National Highway bypass from Karakutam in Trivandrum to Karur on the Tamil Nadu border, where the stones have been laid for 40 years and for various reasons the project had lapsed and never been picked up, and the people were in despair because as long as the stones had been, marker stones had been laid, they couldn't dispose of their land, because everyone said, why should we buy it from you when the government may take it over any time? And I was the one who actually got, during UPA 2, all the clearances from the various ministers, got it included in the UPA's budget, got the survey done, chased after state government ministers who transferred the surveyors out so they don't want to do the survey, got them back, got the survey done, chased the minister to get the file signed on time, and even called the government press office to make sure that the Gazette notification was printed before the 12-month lapsing date, an expiry date at which the project would have lapsed. Did everything, and then spoke personally to the member of finance in those days of the NHAI to make sure that money was transferred expeditiously to the Kerala government to pay, and before the code of conduct was declared in the 2014 elections, the first checks changed hands to buy the land to build the road. So that 5 years of work is what is now being implemented in construction. But even construction is never a smooth process, especially in Kerala, where people are very conscious of their democratic rights. So frequently there are work stoppages as communities demand that the road take a different route, or that it's crossing through a traditional road they've been using, and I then go and I have peace meetings between them and the bureaucrats, the National Highway authorities, get an overpass built, an underpass or an overbridge. All of that stuff being done. I did that on 100 different occasions throughout the highway, and as a result the road is done 90%, whereas the BJP has their own MP and their own minister just next door in Kanyakumari, and the same road there, because he started only under the BJP government and I had done all the groundwork already, is only about 10% of where my road is. So it's silly for a BJP contender to challenge my accomplishments, because it's visible to anybody who actually...
all this is going to pay off, is what you're suggesting.
Oh, absolutely.
Come April 23rd.
Absolutely.
Okay, let's move on now from your constituency and look at the state of Kerala as a whole. Rahul Gandhi contesting from Wayanad. Your thoughts on that? Because several commentators believe that it has antagonized your natural ally at the center, the left?
Well, this national ally talk is a bit silly. They've never been an ally of ours, number one. And number two, in Kerala, they have been historically and still are our principal adversaries. They are staunch critics of the Congress party, in fact, quite vituperative. The nastiest campaigns against me and other Congress MPs have been run by the left. It's only now that the BJP has added to the mix, as it were. It's slightly laughable for the left to act as if we are sort of their partners in Kerala, and why are we stabbing them in the back? Because we're not their partners in Kerala, we're their principal rivals. But the magic of the Congress party is that parties that challenge us in the polls are still prepared to support us in a post-poll phase, as we saw in 2004, when the left, the CPI and the CPM, routed our candidates in 2004. I think two of our allies won, but 18 other seats were taken by the left. And yet, when UPA-1 was formed, they chose to support UPA-1 from the outside. So the post-poll calculation is always different from the pre-poll. And it's odd for Mr. Yechuri, who otherwise is a very sensible man, to apply the logic of post-poll to the pre-poll period. This is a pre-poll decision. Rahul Gandhi has sent two very important messages by his decision to contest in Wayanad. The first is, if you want to be Prime Minister of India, you really ought to be Prime Minister of all Indians. He is demonstrating that he can be elected from both the north and the south. Does Narendra Modi have the courage to do that? Can Narendra Modi contest a seat in either Tamil Nadu or Kerala? Clearly not. Second message. Under the BJP, we've seen a growing gap, a breach growing between North and South India. The Hindi, Hindutva, Hindustan doctrine that the BJP practices and follows has alienated a lot of people in the four southern states. And Rahul Gandhi is signaling that he is prepared to help heal the breach by being a symbol from the north of affinity with the south.
So that having been said, does it not upset the voter on the ground in Amethi?
I don't think so, because that's been a traditional seat of the Gandhi family for quite some time now. And it seems to me, I may be wrong, that Rahul Gandhi should be able to hold his own there, even while dividing his attention. Don't forget that he is already not spending full time in Amethi. He is campaigning in every state of the country every day as leader of the principal opposition party.
That's one of the biggest grouses as well, that the constituency is being neglected.
So one of the challenges anybody, I mean, how much time has Mr. Modi spent in Varanasi? Certainly less than Rahul Gandhi has spent in Amethi. So the challenge is, when you're national leader of a national political party, your responsibilities are national. And you're going to have to be everywhere. I mean, I'm president of one cell in the Congress party, the All India Professionals Congress. And I know how onerous are the demands from every corner of the country. But for the last 6 weeks, I haven't been anywhere but Trivandrum, because this is where my challenge is. This is where I'm trying to win my seat. And Rahul Gandhi can't afford to take an approach like that. He has to be the voice and face of the party in every state of the union. And I get his schedule every day. He's in a different state. He's campaigning truly hard. So to my mind, whether he was running from Amethi or Wayanad or both or neither, his obligation is to be everywhere. And those constituents who would like to have a prime minister represent them will have to understand that, as many have done in the past with previous prime ministers.
Is he the true challenger to Prime Minister Narendra Modi?
I think from the Congress party's point of view, he is our leader and he is the challenger. From a future UPA-3 point of view, everything will depend on a mutual consensus amongst all the parties. You may remember that that in UPA-1, Congress had only 146 seats, and yet all the allies decided that Congress should have the prime ministership and offered it to Mrs. Gandhi. In UPA-2, Congress had 206 seats, and there was no discussion, it was just assumed. So a lot will depend on the final numbers.
Coming back to Kerala now, Sabrimala, is that something that has hurt you, something that has hurt the Congress, something that the BJP has taken advantage of?
Well, yes, but I'm amazed that the BJP is actually, winning support for its role in Sabrimala, which has been a disgraceful role from the point of view of the very people they claim to be supporting. They're going around saying, we stood with the believers. But how do they stand with the believers? For any Supreme Court verdict, there are only two ways you can resolve it. One is the court itself overturns its decision. That's a judicial review, and that requires a review petition. The central government of the BJP never submitted a review petition. Congress party did. The second way is to introduce a law or an ordinance. The BJP is in power, it's got a humongous majority in the Lok Sabha, never introduced a law. Shashi Tharoor stands up on the 19th of December and asks for a law. Minister says, I'll look into it and come back. Never comes back. Budget session, 5th of February, I again stand up and ask, this time no reply. So anything that they could have done while in power to help ease the pain of the believers, they never did. Instead, they created bedlam in the streets, obstructed worshippers, converted a sacred shrine into a stage of political drama in order to win attention for themselves and win votes. But that's their political interest. That's not standing with the believers. So we are trying to point out to the believers, and some people have begun to sit up and take notice, you've been had. The BJP does not deserve your vote, because what can they do by winning your votes that they couldn't have done when they already had power?
So
there is no answer.
Isn't there a groundswell of support for the BJP on this particular issue on the ground here in Kerala?
No, I'm agreeing that there is, but I'm also saying it's a totally illogical support. And we are pointing out that this is illogical.
But it's working in their favor.
So, I mean, we should not celebrate exploiting the innocence or ignorance of the voter, or the gullibility of the voter. If people keep on saying often enough, we stood by you in Sabrimala, the voter might believe it without thinking too hard. But if you ask exactly how did you stand by us? Did you bring a law? No. Did you submit a review petition? No. Did your government think of an ordinance? No. What did you do? You went and created a mess to have your face on TV, and as a result your popularity has gone up. But what have you done for the believers' pain? Nothing. That question is something we are asking, and at least those who think for 2 minutes will realize the BJP has not stood with the believers, it's only stood with its own political interest.
You know,
apologies for all the shifting around. I've got red ants biting me all over from a mishap on the campaign trail. But anyway, go on.
Understandable, and it's completely all right. But you know, talking about the LDF, you said the principal challenger really as far as Kerala is concerned is the LDF. But the LDF seems to be ceding space to the BJP in the state. Is that something that concerns you? Because the BJP's vote share has only gone up over the years. They have also managed to make an entry into the Legislative Assembly. All these things should worry you.
So they have one MLA out of 140.
But it's an entry.
It's an entry. And obviously my seat is where they're hoping to enter the Lok Sabha as well.
Yeah.
For the first time. This is talk about BJP opening its account. I'm not going to let them open their account if I can possibly help it. I'm working as hard as I can to prevent that. But as a sort of statistical feature, they have been gaining in support, but the best they've done, which was in the assembly elections last time, was 15%. 15 is not going to be enough to win them many seats, either in the Assembly or in the Lok Sabha. But their trend has been upwards. And between the left and us, pretty much everywhere else, we've been able to hold our own. And we are at the moment looking forward. If the surveys, which as I said, I mistrust, are even halfway accurate, we're looking forward to getting a pretty dramatic sweep of the state this time, then Trivandrum stands out as an exception where the BJP, it's the one place where the BJP is genuinely a credible contender for the demographic reasons I mentioned to you, and because of their tactic of communal polarization. But the majority in Kerala is not, I think, going to stand for this communal mindedness beyond a certain point. We have been for long known as a progressive state, and I can't imagine very seriously that we're going to abandon those progressive values because one party campaigns aggressively and with a lot of money and muscle power.
You know, let's look beyond the state of Kerala and talk about national politics.
Sure.
Because it's Lok Sabha elections at the end of the day.
Yep.
You know, as far as your internal assessment is concerned, how well do you think that the Congress is going to perform in the elections?
I think pretty well, but I should warn you, I've been really a bit out of touch with the national picture because my focus has been here. And so first-hand information I don't really have. I just have second-hand sources and so on. And even there, 90% of my mind space is occupied by what's going on here. Broadly speaking, I would agree that just after Balakot, that the BJP saw a spike in its fortunes, which were otherwise very much on the decline. But I think certainly in the south that wore off in 24 hours. Whether in the north it's lasted longer is a debatable point, because how much longer is longer? The first voting was on the 11th of April. And by then, a lot of people have more important things to worry about. No one is against standing up against terrorism. But a lot of people are concerned about the daily terror of hunger, of ill health, of disease, of losing access to their currency through demonetization, of unemployment, and the daily terror of not having a job. I mean, these are things that people are truly concerned about in this country. And I think if we do a good job in campaigning to remind the public that these are things that matter and these are the things the BJP has not provided them, then I think we should be able to score big across the country.
Are you surprised at all by any chance, with the way the BJP has turned the narrative around over the last couple of months? In 2014, it was trying to, deliver to an aspirational India, talking about Achhe Din. But this time around, they're playing on national security, trying to play on the insecurity, really, as far as the voter is concerned.
That's right. They're trying to make this into a khaki election. And I'm very glad to see the statement by a number of retired armed services personnel saying that the army should not be politicized in this way. I mean, all this balderdash about Modi ji ki Sena. I'm sorry, Modi ji doesn't have a Sena. India has a Sena. All of us Indians have an equal stake in it as Mr. Modi has. But having said that, the truth is that they have been very good at setting the agenda, and partly because their very obliging media has caved in. Whether they're being cajoled or cudgeled is a different argument, but they have been essentially allowing the BJP to set the agenda, and the BJP has done so twice now. Achhe Din was sold very effectively 5 years ago. Achhe Din never came for anybody, so now they can no longer market that set of dreams. They're marketing fear instead. Well, I want to ask the Indian voter, do you want to vote for a party that represents hope or a party that represents fear? Do you want to vote for people who tell you, be very afraid unless I protect you, or people who tell you, we want to empower you, you don't have to be afraid of anybody? It seems to me the choice is very clear, and the choice that I stand for is the right one.
So what is the Congress's agenda, really? What are your top 3 priorities for the country?
Jobs is very clearly, if you saw our manifesto, we've thought it through. Ministry of Jobs, very specific sectors identified, and a measurable plan, including incentives to create jobs and rewards in the tax structure for doing so. Linked to that, we have to obviously grow our economy, particular emphasis on MSMEs, with again specific elements indicated in the manifesto. And farmers, because we cannot afford to be the country that holds the world record for farmer suicides and gets worse every year. We have to fix the distress in the agricultural sector, and that calls for some very serious consultations about radical reforms in the way in which we've gone about dealing with the farm sector. So those are the top 3, it seems to me. You can find other top 3. I mean, I'm a foreign policy buff. I might think of foreign relations and other things like that.
Going to come to that.
And of course, anti-terrorism. All of these issues are all there as well.
But how are you going to...
Jobs, economic growth, and farmers are the top 3.
How are you going to fit these things in your scheme of things, especially when you have something like a Nyay? What happens to the fiscal deficit? Where is the money going to come from?
The Congress has made it very clear, and I think people like Mr. Trivandrum have given a number of interviews in detail afterwards, saying, first of all, that we have already costed this, crunched the numbers. We believe that the skepticism about the total amount is completely unfounded. We have that money in the budget. Second, that we will not add taxes on the middle class, the lower middle class. We will not squeeze small businesses and startups and so on to fund it. Third, we will also identify the beneficiaries from existing methods like the NSSO survey and the caste census of 2011, which will find you the 20% of poorest households without too much difficulty. And finally, when it comes to how we're going to implement it, we've talked about a small experimental pilot project to be followed by a temporary rollout phase, and only then a nationwide expansion of the scheme. So all of this means we're going to proceed with due caution and deliberation. We have long been responsible stewards of the economy. The Congress brought us liberalization. The Congress has in many ways got very little to apologize for in the way it's run the economy in the past, and I think we can run it even better. Certainly better than those who gave us demonetization, the complete botch-up of GST implementation with 5 rates and God knows what other mess, so many exclusions, so many confusions. We are a government that we will be a government that will do things clearly, simply, and maturely.
And before I let you go, I must ask you this question. What is your foreign policy blueprint if the Congress comes to power?
Well, look, it seems to me that we have to fix relations with our neighbors as the topmost priority. Look at the mess we're in right around the neighborhood. Just a few months ago, we had everything possibly going wrong everywhere. Fortunately, 1 or 2 countries, things have improved a bit. Maldives, their election saved us. It wasn't Indian policy. Otherwise, we had Maldivians advertising for vacancies saying Indian citizens need not apply. That's how unwelcome we were in a tiny neighbor that was so dependent on us. So we need to fix the neighborhood. Mr. Modi alienated Nepal with its blockade. He's offended Bhutan. Sri Lanka is sniping at us. At least one half of their government is at any given time, etc., etc. And Pakistan policy has been incoherent and a mess. So we need mature hands looking after the neighborhood. And then I think we also need to really think through our economic foreign policy.
And before I let you go, one final comment on something that you would like to share with us on a lighter note. You've been traveling on the streets of Trivandrum from morning to night. You told us at the beginning of the interview itself. Leave us with something on a lighter note.
Oh, I don't know. I've just told you that just before I came to see you, my vehicle hit a branch of a tree and dislodged a colony of about 200 ants that descended on me, red ants, that descended on me and my traveling colleague. And we have been sort of doing contortionist dances instead of just waving at the crowds and making our short speeches because of the number of ants that are biting the heck out of us. Campaigning offers a lot of delights, but also some tortures like that.
All right, Dr. Tharoor, a pleasure having you on the program. Thank you so much for taking time off your busy schedule and giving this interview to Rajya Sabha TV.
Thank you, Frank. Always a pleasure talking to you.
All the very best, and do well in the upcoming elections.
Thank you.
With that, it's a wrap on this edition of Frank Talk. See you again next time.